Many years ago, a group of young people entered a cave where they would fall asleep for centuries. Until there is a question for you. You fell asleep today. When you open your eyes again, the date shows 2329. I mean, what would you have done exactly 309 years ago while you were asleep? Don't say if that will happen, because it's happened to someone before. In fact, how did someone else come to life again exactly 100 years after he lost his life? Interesting, mysterious events have happened and continue to happen in our world throughout history. One of the most mysterious of these happened in a cave that has taken a place in other religions, especially Islam and Christianity, and is thought to be located within the borders of Turkey. I will tell you what happened to the young people who fell asleep with their dogs and woke up centuries later. But this interesting event is not the only mysterious event that happened. Because again, a person mentioned in the Quran was revived by Allah 100 years after he lost his life. Why will you be so surprised at that interesting conversation between Allah and this person who woke up after 100 years? Why Allah? Deck. It revives a person again after 100 years. And you will find the answer to his question in this conversation. Because the message in the speech actually concerns us all. Events full of secrets beyond the concept of time as we know it. This event, about which limited information has been provided in the Holy Quran, appears in older sources with some interesting details. So it is useful to examine the accuracy of information other than the Quran by saying that Allah knows. There is a rumor that the cave where the incident took place is located in 33 different countries. But one of the most accepted ones of this cave is located in the Ephesus district of Izmir, and the other one is located in the Tarsus district of Mersin. The Ephesian version of this event that happened is as follows. There was a huge city many years before today. The Ephesians lived in this city against all this time. Be sure to visit the ancient city of Ephesus to see the ruins that remain. At that time, the Ephesians worshipped Artemis. The priests of that time were filling the temple of Artemis, the first temple made of marble, one of the 7 wonders of the world, with gold, and Rome's evil-hearted were blowing off the heads of everyone living in Ephesus who did not worship idols. Although there is no clear information about their number in the Quran, Christian sources indicate that there were 7 people. A group of Ephesian young people did not want to worship idols. But because they knew that their heads were going to go, they had to make a plan to survive. So they decided to run away from the city with their dog, whose name is Kitmir, which they took with them, and while walking along the slopes of Mount Fair, they came across a cave. They take refuge in a cave to spend the night there. They also plant their dog Kitmir at the entrance of the cave as a guard. But after a while, Kitmir also falls asleep, and then the police come and block the entrance to the cave with big rocks. The young people inside were still sleeping. Days have passed, months have passed, years, even centuries have passed, but young people are still sleeping. One day, a shepherd who was grazing his animals in the area where the cave was located noticed a cave closed with rocks and started to move the rocks. Sunlight seeped into the cave through the gap that opened after a rock he planted with his strength. As the sunlight entered the cave, there was the sound of a dog barking from inside. He had woken up in Kitmir with the sunlight. Then the sleeping young people opened their eyes and the bellies of the young people opened. One of them handed a copper coin to the other. and he told him to go down to the city and buy bread. The sleeping idiot, unable to understand what had happened, came down from the fair mountain and came to the city with a careless head under the influence of the sunlight that came to his young face. He was very surprised by the signs of the cross he saw on the sidewalks. What happened when he came to the Sunday place and entered the store, took his bread and handed the money to the seller? The salesman screamed directly that he was a thief. Before the teenager realized what had happened, the cops came and grabbed him by the arms. What they suspect is the money in his hand. Where did you get this money from? This money is a historical artifact. The confused teenager still does not realize what happened. They later took the teenager to the Yuana church. And the city he saw on the way was very different from the one he saw just yesterday. Everything is understood in the church, based on what the chief priest told the teenager who gave the fatwa that they witnessed a miracle and the money in his hand. It was clear that the teenager and his friends had traveled from hundreds of years ago to the present day only overnight. Unlike the concept of time travel as we know it, they actually did not wake up suddenly centuries later, as stated in the Quran. Indeed, they had been asleep the whole time. But how come they had felt like just one night? I will give a place about time soon. Having heard about the interesting incident, the emperor immediately came to Ephesus from the Second Byzantium. The 7 teenagers and the dog in question were also consulted. The young people, who felt that the time from falling asleep in the cave to waking up felt like just one night, could not understand what they were. What really happened in that cave? What happened? And did these young people fall into a sleep that lasted for hundreds of years? If we come to the mention of this very mysterious event in the Quran Kareem, the 18th surah of the Noble Quran, in which this story, called the Companions of the Cave, is told, has been given the name Kef because of the importance of this story. In Surat al-Kahf, it is mentioned as follows about how many young people there are. By making random guesses about what they don't know, they are 3 people. The 4th will say that they are their dogs, the 5th will say that they are their dogs, and the 6th will say that they are their dogs. They will say that there are 7 of them, and the 8th is their dog. Say, my Lord knows their number better. In the 21st verse, they stayed in their caves for 300 years. It passes because they added to it in 9 years. We see in this incident that the young people who will be out of their lives because they do not worship idols have struggled for their faith. And despite being persecuted for this, they were protected by Allah in this cave after they did not accept the Western truth and were somehow brought to success. Mysterious events that occur beyond the concept of time as we know it are not limited to this either. In another interesting incident mentioned in the Quran, it is related to Uzziah alayhi salam. When Uzziah alayhi salam was freed from the captivity of Babylon and came to Jerusalem, he was very sad when he saw the ruined state of the city. He got off his donkey and tied him to a rock where he was found. And he said to himself, I wonder if this ruined place will ever regain its vitality and become a bustling city like before. While he was going through these things in his head, he fell asleep and his soul was taken in his sleep. I mean, he lost his life. He was 50 years old when he lost his life, and he had a son who was 18. His body has been hidden from people for a long time, until, after a decadent century had passed, he opened his eyes again. When he wakes up, he sees the city that has just been on his mind and how he thinks it will be the same again, rebuilt in a way. Because 100 years had passed. Dek, for Uzziah alayhi salam, time had passed as if just sleeping and waking up. When he opened his eyes, he straightened up and Allah asked him, "How long had you stayed?" He replied that about a day or so, because he felt like he had fallen asleep and woken up. So Allah said to him, "No, you stayed for a full 100 years," and he was surprised. How could it be? And his body was the same. Moreover, even the food he carried with him was fresh as before. Uzziah alayhi salam said that if I had remained dead for 100 years, my flesh would have rotted and my bones would have scattered. And Allah continued, "Then look at your donkey." Uzziah alayhi salam, what should he see when he looks at his donkey? Only the bones of the donkey that he had tied up before were left scattered left and right. He realized at that moment that a century had really passed. Allah decrees in the verse that we resurrected you after 100 years so that we would make you a sign of our power for people. After this incident, according to the rumor, Uzziah alayhis, who came back to the city with his 50-year-old body, met his 118-year-old surviving son. And thanks to the crescent-shaped mole on his back, he proved to his son that he was his father. Has anything caught your attention in all these mysterious events that have happened? The concept has worked very contrary to what we know. During what seemed to them like just one night, hundreds of years actually passed. For some reason, this situation reminded me of the movie Between the Stars, if you've seen Dek. In the movie, we watched an astronaut in the movie who could travel to the stars very quickly using wormholes in space. There is also a bad side to having achieved this speed thanks to wormholes, which are currently being scientifically researched, but are still a theory. In the film, the 1-hour period spent by the astronaut during his journey to the stars caused 7 years to have passed in Earth time. That's why when the astronaut, who managed to complete his big adventurous mission and return to Earth, returned home, the little girl he had left behind welcomed him as a very old woman now. Although this situation is currently being investigated in science in a theoretical sense, we have important information about this event in our religion. Again, in the 47th verse of Surat al-Hajj in the Quran, one day in the sight of Allah is like 1,000 years from what you count, he says. In the 4th verse of Surat al-Miraj, it is said that the angels and the Spirit come out there on a day whose amount is 50,000 years. As it can be seen, many people have experienced events about time in the past that are outside of what we are used to. When the Prophet comes back from all the experiences they had in the Miraji incident, his bed is still as warm as he left it, which greatly increases the mystery of all these concept of time questions. What about us? Will we also have an experience beyond the concept of time as we know it? After losing our lives, while we are waiting in our graves, I think we will say yes, it was like yesterday. When Israfil alayhi salam blew the trumpet for the 2nd time,